Hello, everybody. Happy new week. Hopefully last week's lab wasn't too much trouble for everybody. Luckily, this week's lab is going to be super easy, giving you guys time to study for your first exam and lecture. So what we're going to be doing this week is just installing Google Earth Pro and going over some of the real basics so that we can use Google Earth Pro in future labs. So there's not going to be a PowerPoint presentation from me this week. Instead, I'll just go over what the lab materials say and run through a few basics in Google Earth Pro that the lab covers. So first, we're going to switch over to the lab. So step one, you're going to install Google Earth Pro. There are good instructions for that here. Follow those instructions. If you have any issues, reach out to me. And very importantly, if you find for whatever reason that your computer can't run Google Earth Pro, and it should be able to, because I've never encountered a computer that can't, but you need to be able to run Google Earth Pro for these labs. So if you find that your computer can't, please reach out to me and we'll have to figure out something else. Google Earth in the browser is not going to cut it for the future labs. So we need the Pro version. So you'll follow the installation instructions here. And then the lab goes over some of the basics and what these various things do in Google Earth Pro. I'll go over those again in a second here. And then for your activity, it's again going to be learning some of these basics and then taking some screenshots and submitting those to Blackboard, which I'll go over at the end. So let's go ahead and switch over to Google Earth Pro. So when you open Google Earth Pro after you've installed it, this is probably what you'll be greeted by first. So if you've never used Google Earth Pro before, it might be a little overwhelming. So there are 3 or maybe 4 major areas that you're going to want to focus on. The first is this sort of sidebar. You'll see there's a search feature where you can search different kinds of locations to get different places. There's a places bar that saves polygons and place marks that you've created. This is where you'll be able to access those sorts of things when we make one. There's a layers field. These are layers that Google Earth provides, such as borders and labels. You can see those can be toggled on and off. Up here, these are sorts of the features of Google Earth Pro, such as making a place mark, adding a polygon, and looking at historical imagery. So here you can see if we switch it to historical imagery, we can sort of travel through time and see what the Earth looked like at that point. So then the last major section over here, these are your sorts of movement and zoom features. You can move with these arrows if you want, or by dragging around the map. You can zoom with scroll or here. And then here, I'll go ahead and get to a location so I can show you that in better detail. So if I want to go to maybe Gambrel, I can search that location there and Google Earth Pro will zoom in. So here we can see Gambrel Hall. If I want to change my angle to the ground or the angle relative to the compass, that is what these arrows are for. So I can actually, you can see if I zoom in, you can get sort of a 3-dimensional perspective using these arrows. And then if you want to reset that, you can either just sort of drag it down, or you can go view and reset tilt. So let's say I wanted to make a marker on Gambrel Hall so I could come back to it. So what I can do is I can add a place mark. Here, I can title it Gambrel Hall, hit OK. And now you can see under My Places, even when I delete the search, I still have Gambrel Hall and it can be toggled on and off. If I want to mark sort of a landmark on the ground, I can also just drop a place mark and drop it somewhere else. So I could, let's say I wanted to mark the horseshoe. I can throw it down here, call it the horseshoe. And now I've got two markers, Gambrel Hall and the horseshoe. And you can see those stay as I zoom in and out. And then the other option you have here is when you zoom in enough, you'll see that Street View becomes an option. So you can pull this Street View guy off, drop it where you want to go, and that will give you Street View imagery. So you can see here I am at the horseshoe. Now, if I want to get out of this view, I click Exit Street View, and I can zoom out again. So those are the basics we'll be covering this lab. You're going to need to do that for some specific places in the lab, and then you're going to need to screenshot that for this week's lab. I have a Mac, so for me to screenshot, it is Command-Shift-4. There will be similar things on PC that will also do screenshots. You can highlight an area and screenshot it. All right, so let's go back to that lab material then. So if we hop back over to the lab itself, we can see what your assignments will be. So you're going to take screenshots in Google Earth Pro according to the instructions here of the Callcott Social Science building, which is the geography building on campus, where this class would be held if we weren't online. And you're going to do a Google Street View screen grab of the location described in the lab. Again, if you have any problems accessing or using Google Earth Pro, we're going to need it for future labs. So you need to get in touch with me as soon as possible so we can figure out some kind of accommodation. Instead of having a quiz this week, you're going to put those two screenshots in a Word document. You're going to include a little blurb stating that you've been able to use Google Earth Pro, you're familiar with the functions that we go over in the lab, and essentially that you'll be able to use Google Earth Pro on future labs. So you're going to include that blurb, the two screenshots that you took during the lab, and you're going to submit it as either a .docs or as a .pdf, a Word document or a PDF, to Blackboard under Lab 3 quiz, which is just in the regular lab quizzes folder, by the regular date, 11:59 this coming Sunday. Hopefully that'll make things easier so you don't have to worry about a quiz this week while you're also having to worry about an exam. If you have any questions at any point, email me, drop into my Zoom office hours. Hopefully I can help. Other than that, good luck on your exam. Have a great week, everybody.